好，我们下面讲哈德森讲座第3讲的第7段，标题是当今美国美元霸权的基础，双重金融标准，双标。其实我们都知道，美国双标是在各个领域中都是很明显的啊，最明显的就是政治、人权、民主、自由等等这些被当作这个意识形态的这些软实力概念，但是很少有人注意哈。金融上也是双标，那金融双标最主要的双标就是债务问题啊。这个刚才我们讨论中大家都知道，这个从债权国向债务国的转化，是因为美国在世界上的这个军事霸权，维持军事霸权呢，就是美国的军事开支非常贵啊，一个美国兵的装备是其他的发展中国家的好几10倍那个开支啊。美国人打一场战争呢，一定是一个高消耗的战争。他原来是支持别人打仗的时候，别人向他买军火，因此别人变成对他负债。当他自己要控制世界，他自己打仗的时候，一样啊，他也就变成债务国吗？这难道不是个客观规律吗？但是在债务问题上的双标是最糟糕的，因为美国在债权国的时候是要求别的国家按照他的要求来改变别的国家的制度，服从他，变成他的依附。而当他变成最大债务国的时候，他仍然是要求所有国家服从他。你如果不把你这个国家的贸易盈余返回到美国资本市场上，去帮助他稳定他的美元汇率，继续保持美元对世界上的霸权地位，那你就是对他的所谓敌对。
In the 19th century, classical economics all looked at the dynamic of industrial capitalism as being the free economies from rent-seeking. The whole idea was that wealthy industrial nations were going to invest in less developed countries to help them catch up and spread democratic politics and public investment to modernize colonial and other developed economies. Karl Marx believed that also. He gave a speech to the Chartists, the labor organizations of London, saying that, well, British investment in India is going to end up breaking down India's backwardness, and it will help make England replicate industrial capitalism in these countries. Almost everybody in the 19th century had that optimistic view, and they saw finally colonialism will be something positive. It'll help industrialized countries, because we all know that's not what happened. Instead, colonialism and the American Washington Consensus, today's neoliberal post-classical economics rejects the classical economic doctrine of freeing markets from rent seekers and freeing governments from control by their narrow oligarchies. Now, this is not progress. It is a post-industrial society, but it's really a relapse into backwardness. It's almost a retrogression back to feudal property-owning creditor class. And here's the problem that third world debtors face today, and that other countries wanting to withdraw from the dollar standards also face. How are they going to finance trade among themselves? US officials still relate to the third world debtor countries with a pro-creditor position, defending bondholders, both US investors, and also many bondholders of Argentina, Brazil, and third world countries are rich Argentinians and rich Brazilians. And they know, because they control the government, that they are going to pay the foreign debts, mainly to themselves, operating out of their offshore bank accounts. And now vulture funds have taken over. And vulture funds, once the third world or the regular financial major institutions and banks say, well, okay, we realize that there's a coronavirus right now. We realize that raw materials prices are declining and that the third world countries can't pay their debts. Let's sell off our bonds. You know, we're taking our money and running. And they sell out to vulture funds who buy these bonds at just a few pennies on the dollar, and that's what's happened to a lot of Argentina bonds. There's a whole fight right now over whether Argentina can write down its foreign debts, and they're being sued by vulture funds that say, no, you have to pay 100 cents on the dollar. We spent 2 cents on the dollar to buy your bonds, and we want to be repaid 100 cents on the dollar. That's how we make the money. That is what, they're amazingly enough, that is what the international legal courts are having to handle. And obviously, if you buy Argentinian or Brazilian bonds at 2 cents or 10 cents on the dollar, why should you have any right to get 100 cents on the dollar? The basis of finance capitalism, enlightened finance capitalism, is we have a claim on a country. We can't get more than they can pay, so let's write down the debt to reflect what they can pay. Just like when a stock company, when a company will lose its sales markets or its export markets, the stock price declines. The debt price should decline to reflect the actual ability to pay. That is not the basis of international law today. International law says any claim should be paid at face value, otherwise send in the Marines or put sanctions on the country and foreclose on it by letting the bondholders grab whatever assets the country has abroad. I mentioned earlier Venezuela's oil distribution networks in the US and Argentina's naval ships in Africa, which actually the courts would not let Paul Singer's vulture fund grab. So the coronavirus has slashed industrial production throughout the world. It's thrown third world trade into a deficit. And the question is, how are you going to have a world system that doesn't impoverish countries by having a one-sided creditor rule? So while the US follows a debtor policy towards Europe and China and Russia and payment surplus countries, saying you have to accept our IOUs even though we can't pay them, it says for the third world and other weak non-industrial countries, you can't accept their IOUs at all. You have to foreclose and grab what they have, but you can't foreclose on us. You can't use your dollars to do what you do to Latin America. You can't use your dollars to take America's investments in your countries. You can't use the dollars to buy American assets abroad and seize them as American bondholders can seize other countries. This is the double financial standard that is the basis for America's dollar hegemony today. Now, third world countries cannot do what people worried America could do. They can't inflate their way out of debt by printing more money because their debt is denominated in foreign currencies, not in their own currencies. They can print pesos, but they can't print dollars, and their foreign debt is in dollars. So they can't get out of the debt quandary in the way that the United States can inflate its way out of dollar debt. Now, for the same reason, they can't increase taxes to raise the money to pay foreign creditors. The IMF keeps telling other countries, raise taxes on labor, not on business. The first thing the IMF tells a debtor country is to raise taxes on income taxes on labor, land, and industry. So when Argentina and Brazil and other countries do this, the taxes they raise are in their domestic currency, escudos or pesos or whatever, and they still have to convert these into dollars. And raising taxes does not help them get the dollars to pay the foreign debts at all. So the IMF is giving them bad advice. They know it's bad advice. They know it's junk advice. That's why they give it to them. It's junk advice that helps the United States, because the junk advice that debtor countries are told to do destroys their economy and lets American investors come in and take them over. So this is dollar colonialism, and it's done without gunboats. And it's done because countries willingly say, well, the American dollar system seems to be the only natural system, so we're going to go along with it. And this is what has to be changed if the world is to avoid going into a permanent depression. Attempts to pay Europe's unpayably high debts after World War I, we saw what the result was. It was all in vain. They couldn't pay. And Keynes showed in the 1920s that unless the Allies agreed to buy German exports, there was no way for Germany and the Reichsbank to earn the dollars to pay the reparations to the European allies, to pay their inter-ally debt in dollars still back to the United States. And yet the IMF and US foreign diplomacy today are still following the same disastrous policies that led to war and breakup of Europe after World War I. They're still imposing fiscal austerity and asset sell-offs. And the only consequence can be to further destabilize and impoverish countries in these countries. So this austerity policy is now being imposed on the U.S. economy itself, because the U.S. has developed an economic doctrine telling other countries to obey the U.S. And since this doctrine is the only theory that's taught in schools, American economists actually believe that that's how the U.S. should be run. You pay the debt. The U.S. has become so heavily indebted and debt leveraged that it believes that the way to make the economy grow, to pay off the debt, is to raise taxes and impoverish labor all the more. Well, of course, by impoverishing labor and industry with more taxes, it's even harder to repay the debt that they've run up. And so America is now beginning to look like a third world country, imposing on itself for the first time the same disastrous policies that it's imposed on the third world, which is why the US is deindustrializing rapidly. Not slowly, it's falling off a cliff so rapidly. So the main battle going on today with regard to the diplomacy of dollar hegemony is that every country needs foreign exchange reserves. Every country needs to pay other countries when it imports from them, or when it invests in them, or when it sends profit to investors. Now, dollar reserves are US debt run up by the military. You don't want that. Even foreign countries that do not approve of the combination of US military spending abroad and the takeover of foreign assets must face the fact that if they don't recycle their dollars, then their currencies will rise against the dollar. The only thing they can do to protect their markets is to do what America did to Germany in 1923. It had the depreciating currency tariff, a floating tariff, so that as a currency like the dollar depreciates, the tariff against American exports will automatically rise to prevent American exports from underselling exports that are competitive of you. If the US dollar falls and that makes grain and soybeans cheaper to China, well, more power, then fine, let it fall. But you don't want you don't want or dollar area industrialists to undersell Chinese industrialists. You want to do to other countries exactly what the United States did towards Germany and Europe after World War I. You want to protect yourself from depreciating currencies, and that's the dollar's solution to everything under the kind of chunk economics that it teaches in the schools. So the question is, what's the alternative to paper dollars? And the path of resistance that's taken by Russia, China, and some of the other payment surplus nations is to de-dollarize by buying gold, using their dollar inflows to buy up gold. Because gold is one of the, everybody can agree that it's objective metal. It's an asset without having a debt attached to it. You can buy gold without financing US military spending around your borders. You can buy gold and it just sits there as an asset. You're not funding your adversaries. Holding dollars is to fund a nation that has declared that China is an adversary and that Russia is an adversary. So of course, you don't want to finance the government of a country that's going to war with you. America is going to war with China and Russia financially, economically, and in trade, and almost militarily. It's making probes military right now. So for third world debtor countries, the problem is also, how do you avoid letting foreign debt destroy their economies? Well, you have to say, we're not going to pay the debts. There was, just as there was in 1931, a moratorium on inter-allied debts and German reparations, we demand a moratorium on third world debts for the time being to avoid mass third world poverty. That's the choice, just as it was a choice back in 1931. So in the end, debt write-downs and outright debt write-offs are the only solution. And this needs to be written into the logic of international law. No country should be forced to destroy its economy to pay foreign creditors. That's a tributary demand, a demand for tribute, and it's an act of war. And in fact, such demands in the past could only be imposed by military conquest. Today, they're being imposed by financial conquest, and that's just as destructive, taking into account the decline in population that results from shortening lifespans, rising suicide rates, and immigration. Intellectual conquest is an equally important dimension, and the most important intellectual conquest was that of Yeltsin's Russia. The economy was impoverished by shock therapy that Russia was leaders were persuaded to impose on itself. America said, you'll get rich on no time. Well, what happened is that instead of growing, the economy was bankrupted deliberately. The economy was turned over to Western representative domestic kleptocrats, and the population shrank, suicide rates rose, and the economy spiraled downward until finally President Putin came in and stabilized matters. So the destruction was both financial and intellectual, not military. America didn't have to go to war to make 10 million Russians die. More than Germany had to go to war to kill almost as many Russians in World War II. America did it simply by intellectual conquest. And so dollar diplomacy was a lever that went together with neoliberal economics, Washington consensus, and the kind of junk economics that is taught in American colleges.
最为严重的就是中国最近10年之所以变成美国的敌人，你们也知道，中国在21世纪的第一个10年是美国最好的战略伙伴呢，甚至美国人提出叫中美国呀，要搞中美共治啊，那时候把这个G20和 G7直接都不要了，直接就变成 G2，就是中美国。那21世纪第一个10年既然把这个关系说得这么好，怎么会在第二个10年就变成中国成了最大敌人了呢？就是因为你没有按照他的双标跟着他走，就是因为美国是最大债务国，同时2008年美国爆发华尔街金融海啸，世界上各个国家都不再相信美元还是世界金融霸主的地位啊，他在动摇他自己啊。于是各国开始，那我们抓紧能不能采取点措施，那中国就把自己手里的获得的这个美元外汇盈余做了一带一路啊，同时建立了以美元作为主要投资工具的亚洲基础设施开发银行，去帮助周边国家，对吧？你们周边国家不是有很多属于比较贫困的吗？那你的基础设施条件差，你发展不起来，基础设施又是公用品，对吧？那中国去帮助他们搞基本建设，以形成他们可以发展自己本国民营经济，发展自己本国工业经济的这样的条件，就帮你提供公共品，帮你建立发展经济的条件。这对世界上大多数发展中国家是好事，但是因为它是没把美元投给美国，然后美国拿着美元去控制世界，中国没这么做啊。中国说我自己用了美元去做了对周边国家的援助，甚至增加了大量对非洲的投资，这就动了美国的奶酪。比如说双标，就导致美国作为世界最大债务国，仍然不许你们用美元来开展建设。于是乎中国就变成了主要敌人嘛。更何况中国再进一步，就是既然美元不是很稳定，就是我们对特里分配论这个必须用我们得到的外汇盈余去回填美国那个金融资本窟窿，对这件事情，而且你拿到了我们的钱，你再去控制世界，你甚至拿我们的钱来打我们，这个东西你不能老这么二，不是吗？于是乎你开始做了一些调整，那当然就影响了美国在世界上的属于双标，金融双标嘛。不过话又说回来，这里边还有一个很重要的问题值得我们大家高度关注，就是发展中国家，不光中国哈，发展中国家的大多数知识分子都是对美国的知识体系，就它的软实力是恨不得3跪9叩的。那因此呢，我们对这种金融双标这个问题，我们就几乎没有解释，而我们的金融高官们仍然认为把这个中国的贸易盈余投到美国的国债市场是最安全的，甚至认为美国的美联储才是全球的中央银行，我们的中国人民银行作为中国的货币当局只相当于美联储的北京分行。 就甚至有这种就是金融高官们的说法。所以就是说你在知识上你已经臣服了把你当成敌人的国家，那你在政策上你怎么可能有足够的知识支撑来支撑你改出这种双标的困局呢？好了，我们不多往下说了，我只是希望在座的各位，今天你们听到的是一个美国的资深学者他的分析，对吧？那他也在讲这个跟我们过去多年来反复强调的这些道理几乎相同的道理。我想呢，这至少对我们大家来说是多了一些知识的点位，让我们能够开拓我们的思考。